Welcome and thank you for joining us for our Family Engagement Design Team and Survey Process webinar. My name is Dr. Ann Ishimaru and I am part of the Equitable Parent-School Collaboration Project at the University of Washington, along with my collaborators, Dr. Joe Lott, Dr. John Do Chen, and other members of the EPSC Research Project here at the College of Education. Today, I'd like to share with you an overview of some of the work we've been doing the last few years. One objective today is to learn more about the design process, and the product that came out of that was a parent education curriculum, but we're going to really be talking today about that process as a model that can be used for engaging families in work and design in multiple areas. You'll get a chance to understand more about the design principles that are at the heart of those lessons and at the heart of that process. And we'll be giving you some context in a particular lesson. You'll have an opportunity to apply the principles to understanding data inquiry for equitable collaboration. And we'll all be talking about our family engagement survey that was co-developed with members of the Roadmap project. And finally, we'll make available to you the curriculum and the user's guide for the family engagement survey. So we want to start this by talking about the process. We all like to get really focused on the product as the solution. And we think about maybe a parent curriculum as a fancy product or some outcome, a set of data. And one of the things that we've realized through this work is how important the process is. And those products are just tools. But the process of collaboration between families, communities, and schools results in a different product. So in that sense, the how really determines the what. And we do have this tendency, as you can see in this cartoon here, to sometimes get overly focused on the products and to do so at the expense of the process, and recognizing that sometimes we get the cart out in front of the horse when we do that. And so one of the reasons that we share this set of design principles with you is to help us think about the how, so that we're really attending to the how. When we have different people sitting around the table, then that product, what comes out of it, is often quite different. So today, as I mentioned, we'll give you an overview of the design process. We're going to actually do a little bit of a teaser using one of the lessons that was developed by the parents, teachers, principals, and district leaders in Kent. There'll be a panel. You'll hear from some of those teachers and parents on the panel, and also district leader. And then we'll spend a small amount of time talking about equitable data inquiry and the user's guide. And you'll hear a brief mini panel from some of the folks involved in the Renton survey pilot. So just to zoom out for a second on this broader dilemma around engaging families in student learning and success. We know from decades of research that it makes a difference when families are engaged. It makes a difference in student academic outcomes and success. In fact, one longitudinal study out of Chicago recently found that schools with strong parent-school ties were 10 times more likely to improve in math and 4 times more likely to improve in reading than schools that were weak on that measure. The dilemma, however, is that we have a set of traditional parent involvement approaches. And those approaches are guided by deficit assumptions that we need to fix parents, especially focused on changing marginalized parents and communities. And they assume that schools are neutral spaces where all parents and communities are treated equally regardless of issues of race, class, power, privilege, etc. And we know that that's not the case. So the dilemma, in a sense, is that although we know that family engagement makes a difference, these kind of meaningful engagement, we had a set of default practices that really miss the target. So our work here at the project in the last 4 years or so has really focused on how do we make this paradigm shift? How do we get from this parent involvement paradigm of thinking about how do we reach these hard to reach parents to recognizing schools and school systems as challenging to access and building towards more equitable collaboration between schools, communities, and families. So we're really thinking about how do we get from here to there? So our research has really focused on a common goal of understanding and supporting more equitable collaboration between schools, parents, families, and communities in the roadmap region, which is a region of 7 school districts in South King County and South Seattle. But it's taken the form of 2 different kinds of works, of different kinds of work. One of the case studies and the design work, and you can find on our website a final report for the case studies, and we'll talk tonight about the design work. The other piece has to do with these common indicators and the pilot survey. Again, you can find a white paper about the development of the common parent engagement indicators, which was a collaborative process with roadmap project partners. That resulted in a family engagement survey, which was piloted in the Renton School District this past year, and we'll talk a bit about that at the end of this webinar. So first, something about the Kent Curriculum Design Team. This project began with the premise that parents are experts on their own interests, their own needs and priorities, on their children, on their communities, on their cultures. And we set out to figure out what could be a process for building relationships that really make a difference for our students. And we did that through something called community-based design research. And that sounds really fancy, but at the end of the day, that really had to do with engaging the folks who are most directly impacted, the parents themselves, in this process. And we started with their interests and priorities. We then added teachers and administrators to the mix. We generated new ideas, we tried them out, and then we redesigned. So in essence, we tried out some new lessons and we piloted them with other parents, and then we refined them to improve them. So this is kind of I'm going to overview here the process of the design team. We started with a launch where we really focused on building relationships, sharing hopes and dreams, and also some of the barriers that we encounter. Then we focused on the what. We talked about what are the topics of the lessons in the curriculum, and we brainstormed a huge number of topics that would be really important to attend to, and recognized that within the scope of this Parent Academy, we would only be able to highlight a subset of those topics. So we discussed amongst parents and then also educators what are the highest priority topics. And then we started to talk about how do we want parents to learn these things? Do we want them to sit and passively receive information or get things through handouts, or do we want them to engage with each other and to engage their expertise in that process? So using some of the ideas from both the what and the how, we created a lesson, we piloted it with other parents, and those parents gave us feedback. We used that feedback to revise them. There was a finalizing process, which especially the teachers helped us take to the finishing line, where we drafted the remaining lessons and refined them into an overall curriculum. So here you see the lesson topics. Some of these topics are things you would find in many different parent education curricula, such as effective communications, ensuring academic success. Others of them you might not find as typically, and these were issues that evolved as top priorities for the parents and families involved in this process, including addressing bullying, developing children's positive racial and cultural identities, and parent advocacy and leadership. And at the end of the day, though, this was really about developing the relationships between the folks on our design team and really leveraging the experiences and networks and expertise of all these folks on the team. Now we're going to share just a teaser so you can get a flavor of what those lessons are like. I'm going to just overview really briefly the first 40 minutes. These are all things, not only did the parents identify addressing bullying as a priority, but they identified the purpose to provide participants with resources and the opportunity to discuss strategies for working with schools to ensure a safe, respectful, and inclusive school community. And they identified the objectives. Learn the definition of bullying and how to recognize it. Know how to support a child if he or she is being bullied or is bullying another child. Identify possible strategies for addressing ongoing bullying at the school, and understanding the importance of community responsibility for preventing bullying. So the first two objectives would already have passed by the time we get into these activities. It begins, though, with the human knot. The whole lesson begins with the human knot. The human knot is an activity that the parents came up with as a metaphor for the need to work together to solve and address the issue of bullying. That it's a very complex issue, involves many different people. There are no easy solutions. But if we stick with it, we recognize that all together we can address this problem and create more inclusive schools for all of our children. Early on in the lesson, the parents discuss this definition of bullying as unwanted aggressive behavior that involves the intent to harm and a real or perceived power or strength imbalance. The behavior is repeated or has the potential to be repeated over time. One of the early activities involves a role play in which parents are given cards that describe different scenarios of potential bullying. On the back of the cards, there's some information about different kinds of bullying: physical bullying, verbal bullying, social relational bullying, and cyberbullying or electronic bullying. And the parents engage in an interactive conversation about determining what examples in those scenarios constitute bullying. So, for example, does one time a child hitting another child, does that constitute bullying? What about when a child is being excluded from, say, a birthday party, and that continues to happen to that one child over and over? So the parents are making sense with each other rather than having something dictated to them. They're thinking about how that applies to common scenarios that their children encounter every day. And then we give them some more definition about the distinction between bullying and teasing as they're trying to sort out these different scenarios. And then they're also finally given some statistics about bullying so that they can contextualize that in the broader context. How nearly 2/3 of bullying incidents are not reported to teachers or to other school staff. How most bullying happens when teachers are not around, that teachers observe only about 4% of bullying incidents. And then for less than half of students who have been bullied in 3rd through 12th grade, less than half of them told a parent about their experience. So we highlight the ways in which students are often not talking about these experiences with adults. So this is a scenario. If you are viewing this with other folks, we'd love it if you actually participate in this. This is a scenario that parents and groups are given. They're asked to give advice to Margaret about how to support her son. Her child is in 4th grade and continues to come home each day sharing that he's being bullied. Margaret has talked to the teacher, but the teacher said it's not happening in the classroom. And now her child does not want to go to school in the morning. So parents are in this lesson asked to talk with each other about what advice they would give to her. So after you have this conversation, think about what did you learn through this conversation, and then what did you notice about how you and others engaged in this activity? When we did this activity with folks in the pilot and also in the event at which we shared this information, many things came out about how people were sharing the experiences with each other, that they had many common experiences, but also that they had different perspectives that they were able to bring to the experience. Perspectives of some folks having been parents where this has happened, other folks who are teachers or in other roles where they could share those different experiences. And we really tie this into really thinking about the design principles that emerged from this process. So during the design team process, we recorded every meeting And we transcribed it, hours and hours of transcription, and read it through and analyzed the data. And these are the design principles that came out of that process. They're principles that we started to share with parents in early sessions, and then they gave us feedback and we tried to reshape them. And we've been through many iterations that evolved. This is not something that we had at the beginning. But as you can see in here, these are things that as we attended to in the process, it helps us to really build the kind of collaboration that we were hoping for. So in the beginning here, you can see community capacity, that this process was really about strengthening individual and collective capacity, both to understand what the issues are and know what the resources were, but also to really think about how do we improve our schools together. We focused on building authentic relationships between families, and then also between families and educators. We approach families from the get-go as experts and really work to center their experiences and stories as sources of knowledge, expertise, and also potential solutions. Educators, teachers, principals, district leaders came into this work as learners who are focusing on how to improve their professional practice. We found that it was important to attend to issues of power throughout and power imbalances, and to really plan for equal voice and influence in the process. For instance, after the initial launch, we gave parents some time on their own to develop relationships and share their experiences and concerns before we brought the educators back into the process. And that seemed to help because there are often power imbalances when individual parents are asked to come to a table to participate when they haven't had the chance to build relationships with each other and identify shared experiences and concerns. And finally, as you can see in the topics of the lesson as well as the process or the how of the lessons, is we really try to begin with and prioritize family goals and concerns in the process. Now we'd like you to hear from some of the design team members themselves on a brief panel.
First, I'd just like to start with the parents. And I just want you to talk a bit about what you learned throughout this process.
It was eye-opening. What I thought the school wanted parents to do to be involved in their parents was off to what they really wanted parents to do to be involved. I thought all they wanted us to do was drop the kids off on time, discipline, not give teacher a lot of disrespect, and do their homework and go to conferences, and that was it. And I thought if I was more involved, I might be in their way. So that, knowing that wasn't true, broke down a lot of barriers for me to be more, not intimidated to come to the school and say, hey, I want to get involved and do this more. So it built up my confidence more. That was the great takeaway from that.
Good.
El proceso, todo esto me enseñó a ser un padre más responsable y también ayudar a otros padres a tener conciencia sobre la responsabilidad que tenemos en la escuela de nuestros hijos.
She said that the whole process helped her to be a more responsible parent and to also mentor other parents, if you will.
I guess my experience would be similar. I think I have the same thoughts as Maxine because at the time my child was in kindergarten. So I never had a child in school. So I just thought you just take your kid to school and do everything, they tell you, they send home in the backpack. So, yeah, I can say from that, I learned to be much more involved with not just the teacher, but built a relationship with the principals and other staff. I mean, a lot of the school knows me now, and I'm pretty present and more involved with my son and how things are going there with him. So I would say that kind of just brought me out of the shell to be more involved. and communicate more.
Michelle, what did you learn throughout this process?
By hearing the parents speak, I always figured, because I teach the older grades, I taught first grade for a while, but I've been in sixth grade for a long time, and you don't see the parents in sixth grade, but they're always there in first grade. So I just assumed as the kids grew up, the parents and the children kids don't want their parents around. Parents truly do want to be involved, not necessarily putting up bulletin boards and sitting there. They just want to be in the classroom, seeing how their kids interacting, and they just want to know what the expectations are for their child and how their child's doing by observing it, not just getting a grade on a piece of paper. So instead of thinking parents really stepped out when the kids got in the upper grades, I just realized they didn't feel comfortable to step in. They didn't want to usurp me by asking those questions. So now I just offer a lot more information than I used to when they come to conferences.
Teresa,
Yes, what did I learn?
lessons learned.
Oh gosh, I feel like I learned a lot. But one of the things, and I feel kind of naive saying this, but I did not fully get how important the whole question of race is in the school system. And you know, all the teachers, you know, educators, we get put through diversity training and we do this and that and da-da-da. You know, I've always considered myself a very open-minded person, but, you know, I'm white, and so I don't know what that is like, that experience of, you know, being Asian or Hispanic or Black or whatever it might be, and just hearing parents and just getting that idea that, like, this is a really important issue to help kids feel, you know, proud of who they are and of their culture, and that's as important as all the other things that I do. And that, you know, teaching my kids that, like, talking about race doesn't make you racist. It's just something that we all have to be able to communicate about. So that, and I mean, and I'm that's sort of opening up, you know, just a whole journey for me with that. But that's been a real powerful piece of learning for me. Important, you know, for a teacher.
To piggyback on what she said, after we had that discussion the first time about bringing in racism and racial identity, I had my panic moment. And then I realized that we bring out famous people in different cultures, but we don't bring out leadership in different cultures. So that was something that really changed in me this year. When I do my world cultures and my different groups, I made sure I brought out the leadership and their thinking and why they acted the way they did in each, which was a lot of research for me because I didn't have any of it. But it's not in our books, you know, and I know it's not in our books, but we talk about George Washington, we talk about, you know, Benjamin Franklin, we talk about, but we don't bring out those big leaders in all the different groups. So I really had to research the Latino leaders and what was their causes and, you know, just the different groups, and the Japanese American and Chinese American, what was going on when they came to America. So it changed the way I actually focused my social studies this year.
If you could, you know, take a step back and, if you want to think about your experiences, what comes to mind for you?
Well, what initiated this was, from in the very beginning, was the inability to share curriculum with other leaders throughout the region. And so we wanted to work collectively with a research-based group, the UW, to see if we could design some curriculum piece so that when we were talking with other district leaders about parent engagement kind of systems work, that we could offer something that was a product, you know, tangible. Because of the legal connection that we had with our current curriculum provider, we couldn't do that. So that's where it originated. What, you know, for me, the biggest outcome has been, having been a building principal and a district leader and I'm a parent, is that what helped me have conversations with all groups, parents, principals, and the teachers, was looking at the research and the words. So it's one thing for a district leader to sit in a committee and hear parents talk, and you think that you're catching everything, right? You think you heard
what you thought the parents said they wanted. But then when you go back and you actually read it word for word, you realize how much you didn't hear. Because, like for me, how much of it I wasn't truly listening, right? I was filtering it through my trained eye of thinking about curriculum or thinking about systems. So.
Right. Thank you.
We'd like to shift gears now a little bit and talk about the connection between equitable collaboration and the design principles we just talked about, and now shift to a different context for engaging in equitable collaboration. And that context is really focused on data as a tool for equitable collaboration. Here you can see a graphic that illustrates a series of phases that we use in that process around using the family engagement survey. Now I'll go back to those in just a minute. But we piloted a family engagement survey. As I mentioned before, we had developed 3 common indicators with roadmap project partners, and then we piloted that survey in the Renton School District this last year. We had 3 goals for that. We did seek to collect data so that we could improve and validate the survey instrument, but it was also very important to us to generate actionable baseline data to inform the ongoing family engagement work that was happening in those deep dive schools. And then also to pilot strategies for increasing participation and building parent leadership, particularly among traditionally marginalized families. So how did we do that? There are 3 pieces of the Renton survey pilot: data collection, analysis and interpretation, and then putting the data into action. So in that first component, we really thought about, for those school pilots, how do we increase participation by trying a number of different strategies. Now, the typical district climate survey has about 10 to 20% parent participation, and that tends to be particularly representative of parents from white middle class backgrounds who feel most comfortable participating in these kinds of feedback opportunities. So we thought, what would happen if we increased the number of formats? We made that available in multiple languages. We worked with local community-based organizations and other cultural brokers. Folks were able to self-administer, and we provided an extended time frame for doing that.
Here's your question. What advice would you give to schools who are thinking about implementing this, the survey?
So my advice to a principal in a school community who is going to use this survey would be, what is it you're hoping to learn from it and gain? And what level of comfortableness are you with it not being what you thought validity and reliability should look like? So really getting that definition around it.
I would add to that, that's how I felt when you asked me the question. Well, I was just going to suggest involve the grassroots, the leaders in the grassroots community, because I can speak for the Latino community, but I cannot speak for the Somali community.
Mm-hmm.
So so just to be able to be bold about that, about welcoming those relationships and those suggestions. Some ideas might be really off the wall, very, as I would say, non-traditional, and that became my language for us: traditional, non-traditional. So very non-traditional and very uncomfortable, because it's are we going to get the right, accurate data, or that just doesn't fit in order, we're not used to that. But if the communities that we're trying to serve really give us that feedback, then we really should be bold and listen and have a purpose. So what is your end in mind? So to collect some data, okay, then it's not just going to be tamales and music. That will bring people around our community, but we wanted to get them to this table to give input. And how do we create a process for that? Then we kind of created a passport, the whole idea of a passport. You have to go to each community, partner, and at the end, you get to this table, and that's what you give your. So kind of some of the parents, it was self-selected because the parents who wanted to have a voice self-selected themselves, right? In the process, they couldn't just come for the tamales, right? there are different ways of being engaged, and I think we collected, and there were some, we had a lot of people who don't know what they came from, but, they,
It was a block party.
but then it was a self-selection process because those who wanted to get to the last piece.
In the end, okay, so now fast forward, this was happening in September. Fast forward to June, and we have 22 parents who have risen up as leaders in 2 school communities.
Wow.
And 3 of those 22, because of the partnerships, are employed with the YMCA now, because of the partnership with the YMCA in this as well. So there's just a lot of pieces, but I think what I appreciated from the principals is when they first got the survey data, they had to decide, does it match what they thought they knew? Is it different than what they thought they knew? And that was a journey for them individually. And now where we're at with the 2 principals is they now see that these 6 to 22 parent leaders are not going anywhere. And they're value added. And so now both principals have different approaches, but they're exploring what's next. What can they
All of this pilot resulted in the user's guide for the Roadmap Project Family Engagement Survey. And in that user's guide, we go back through each of these phases and talk about what happened during each phase. We provide tools that were developed during the pilot and raise some ideas, particularly for the folks who are the data analysts, and also about how we might continue to use this process to build better collaboration with families and communities. I'm going to end with a website and acknowledgments and appreciation not only to the research project, but also to all of our partners in the Roadmap Project, including CCER and the Roadmap Project, the Renton School District, also the Kent School District, all of our design team, parents, families, teachers, principals, and district leaders, and all of the many other parent and family leaders and community leaders who have been instrumental in helping this project succeed. Thank you.